Well, hello everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thanks for joining me for tonight's live stream. Oh, hope you guys are having a good weekend. It's been a pretty productive one over here. Hello to Blondie and Osiris and Shanti and Jennifer and anybody else that's lurking in the background. We're so glad you could make it out tonight. Special thanks to Blondie, our hardest working moderator out here. Well, let's see. Do we have any new business? Well, if you're on the book program on Patreon, I swear I'm going to get those books out. It's just renovations have been nuts lately. I keep meaning to, and then I keep forgetting. Just weird because there's a post office like 5 minutes from me. I really need to get my butt down there. Trying to think. I don't think we're going to do a writing contest for September. I think we're going to. I did 2 winners last month because we only had 2 entries. Not that they weren't good; they were really good stories. That's why both of them won. I think we're going to start up another writing contest in October, though, and that's going to be one of our themed contests, and we're going to do a Halloween story contest. So, if you guys want to get your Halloween stories ready, win or lose, I'll probably still read them on the channel for our Halloween Spooktacular, which I've been working hard on. I've got 4 stories already for the October shenanigans there, so that should be cool. Fingers crossed, I'm gonna get my usual 25 in. Usually I do one for each day of the week. Usually it's like Monday through Friday we get a new Halloween story. So looking at the calendar here, looks like 5, 10, 15, 20. There will be 23 new stories. Well, hang on. 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 23 new stories this year. So, and I mean, of course, we'll do some series, we'll do some Kashmir stuff, we'll do some do some other stuff. We'll do a lot of stuff. Those of you who have been here a while know that I like to put on for Halloween, so we're gonna have a great month of October there. Oh yeah, the chickens are doing well. The rooster comes out for pets every time I come in there now, so I've probably because I bring them strawberries every now and again. All the chickens are great. We've started to get eggs, so we know they're getting comfortable. So that's cool. We're just working towards it. Any type of Halloween story. Just whatever. I'm thinking somebody brought up during one of the daytime live streams that they would like to see another choose your own adventure story. And I think I've got 2 in mind that I'm going to do in the month of October. One of them is about a summer camp that some people are revisiting, and another one is going to be around Halloween, and that'll be about trick-or-treaters. Let's see, when does Halloween... Oh, Halloween falls on a Friday, so probably the Saturday after that, we'll do our Halloween live stream, and... because, I know you guys are out trick-or-treating and doing fun stuff. I don't want to take you away from that because I got to get on live stream and do stuff. But, we'll do it Saturday, and we'll do a special Halloween live stream, Choose Your Own Adventure. You would think so, but, I've made D&D campaigns for so many years that usually I just get in there and bang them out, and it takes me like a day. I usually have way less trouble with them than I do my short stories. Eventually, I've got to get some of these published on Amazon, I guess. That way you guys can have your own choose your own adventure Dr. Plague stories, which I guess would be kind of cool. If you haven't got your copy yet, go to Amazon and get your copy of Douglas Gage Beyond Savings by me. Um, I'd offer you a signed copy, but I did not order enough, and I'm going to have to order some more. Oh, so there's that. Hang on, I'll get you guys a link. I'm usually a little better prepared than this. Dang it. No. I gotta click on the right buttons here. Getting a little bit of a late start here tonight. My apologies. Okay. Exactly. You can kind of like run down a lot of different story plots that way. And it just, it really brings the story to life there, Oh, hang on. I'll get you guys an updated link there. Let's see here. I don't know if they change it or what, but like, there we go. Oh, what the heck? That is not at all. Somehow or another, it decided to just link my the Kashmir Medical Center story I was writing. There it is. That should be the link that'll get you your own copy there. And if you want, come join us on Discord. We've got a pretty active Discord community. Here is I always forget which one's mine. There we go. Ugh, losing my voice already. Goodness. That's a bad sign. Well, dadgummit. Usually there's just a button. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Blondie's got it. We'll just go ahead and pin that. If you guys want to join us on Discord, it's always appreciated. Well, he is wrong, Shanti. You wear your spooky pajamas wherever you want. Spooky pajamas are definitely outdoor wear. I don't know. We went to Spirit the other day. That really kind of gets you in the mood. I just want to take all the animatronics home with me, but they're so expensive. Maybe next year, if I can get my corn maze up and running, that'll be a business expense, so I can, justify buying a bunch of animatronics, which is always fun. Let's see. Let me get set up here, and we will start with the stories. I've got a new Monday edition this time as well. Since we lost Richard T. Seraph to the Kashmir Stories, I have decided to open up a new Monday series called Travel Stories. Those of you who remember, there's a travel writer that I sometimes write about. He did the Ghostgrass Hermit and the Toymaker's Woods, and he's had a few stories on, and I've decided to add him to our Monday lineup. So that should be a lot of fun. What is on my knee? know what that is. Hope it's not poop or something. Anyway, so yeah, the travel writer will now be part of our Monday lineup. Yeah, I know, like we didn't already have enough Monday lineup, but I think the sitcom town was another good one, yeah. But I think he'll make a fine addition to our little group of stories here. Anywho, so he will be starting this Monday in the lineup with a story called Fiddling in the Mountains. And I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. Just my mic here. Hey guys, long time no see. I've been pretty busy lately, so sorry for the radio silence. It's tough traveling all over, trying to find weird things to write about, but I suppose it's not really something I can complain about either. I get to see a lot of the world, or at least the United States, and it's always nice to get to have a look at other places and new things. I was in California a couple of days ago, spending some time on the West Coast as I investigate a haunted stretch of boardwalk. I know that sounds pretty dull, but it actually wasn't too bad. Apparently a lot of murders had occurred on that piece of boardwalk, and the city council was looking for some kind of proof that the place was haunted so they could mark it as a tourist trap. I was more than happy to help them with that, but what I found was less supernatural and more of the earth. A bunch of homeless guys had made a camp down there, somehow hooking up their tents under the rafters so they were a little harder to see, and they hadn't really been too keen on me poking around down there. I managed to get out, but it was a near thing. The police had been called, the homeless guys had been rousted, and they'd found some things under there that led me to believe the homeless guys were a little less friendlier than even I had thought. I can't say much, since it's an ongoing investigation, but the cops said any time you find that many wallets and ID cards in one place, it's probably not because they're taking tolls. I gotta remember how to spell rousted. I think it's with a U. There we go. Ooh. No fun at all. Hoo-hoo. I was walking out of the police station, ready to go back to my hotel and sleep for a couple of hours, when my phone rang with the last person I'd expected to hear from. I had actually just been getting ready to try... Yeah, if I could talk today. I had actually just been getting ready to try and draft something for my editor, the guy who's always looking for his next story. But he found me. Yeah. But he told me it would have to wait because he had found something even better. I need you to head to Alabama. They've got something at a house near Jackson that's supposed to be a must-see. Let me guess. It's a pig with Jesus' face, maybe a rooster that can speak in tongues. I will admit I was a little salty about the mirror he had sent me to investigate a few months ago. All in all... Oh, hi Leia. There's one of our winners of the Spooky Story contest for this month. We're going to be reading her story on the channel next week, so you guys will have to keep an eye peeled for that. Oh, hi Cindy. Glad you could make it. I'm all for a good spooky story, but that had been a total waste of time. The mirror had not only had a demon... Yeah. The mirror had not only not had a demon in it, but it hadn't even been that impressive. It was pretty clear that it was, just a LED TV hooked up to a mirror frame, and was scaring the Jesus out of people who didn't know any better. but my editor still wanted a full rundown on it, and I like making my rent too much to tell him no. It had definitely been one of those tourist traps that's better to give a miss to, and I'd been salty about being put on a wild goose chase ever since. Even better, he said. It's supposed to be a fiddle owned by the devil himself. I stood there for a minute or two, just really trying to process what he was telling me. And when I came up with nothing, I finally just had to laugh and get it out of my system. Seth, I don't know what music you've been listening to, but everybody knows that the devil went to Georgia, not Alabama. And that's good. I'm surprised you're not doing a little stand-up while you're out there on the road. Anyway, I'll double your rate if you can be there by tomorrow and take a look before the end of the week. I've already got you a plane ticket and everything. As much as I hated it, money talks and bullshit walks. I was on the next flight to Jackson, Alabama, though I was sour to find out that the jerk hadn't even sprung for first class. I had to ride in coach next to a fussy baby, and his mother was even more fussy. What the heck? Little breakdown in communication there between text and type, I guess. Probably didn't help matters much that the in-flight movie was Snakes on a Plane, not something anybody really wants to be reminded of while you're 3,000 feet up. We landed in about 3 hours, thankfully, without seeing even a single snake, and I went to check in at the Jackson Motor Lodge so that I could get this miserable assignment out of the way. Then I could get back to the real news, like two-headed calves and ghosts who lived in libraries or casino or... Blech. Struggling tonight. Sorry, guys. Ghosts who lived in libraries or casinos or somewhere with a buffet. There we go. Uno momento. Yes, for those of you guys just joining us, this is story number 1, and it's from a new old series about a travel writer that I've added to our Monday lineup, so you can look forward to that in the near future. Oh, definitely. That sounds cool. The lady at the motor lodge was pretty knowledgeable about local tourist traps, and when I mentioned this one, I saw her ears perk up. The Devil Fiddle? Oh, yeah, I know where it's at. Ernest Slocum has it at his house. He's charging $25 a head to see it. It must be something, 'cause he's making pretty good money at it. You've got to be kidding me. You mean people are paying to see that kind of thing? The woman got a sour look on her face. To see a fiddle? No. To look at a fiddle played by the devil himself? They certainly are. You can believe it or not, but I saw that fiddle, and I believe that the devil played it. It's got an aura about it, and a lot of people have seen it. It has been said that they've had bad dreams because of it. Go up there and have a look for yourself before you scoff. It's supposed to be scoff. Go up there and have a look for yourself before you scoff. You might change your mind. Scoff. Look. Hey, Bev, we're glad you could make it. Oh. Well, we're glad you decided to stay up late to see us. I thanked her and took my rental car back into the hollers of northern Alabama so that I could take a look at this so-called devil fiddle. If you've never tried to get a rental car into the hoots and hollers of northern Alabama, then let me just tell you, it's not a lot of fun. I nearly got stuck twice, and the second time I really didn't think I was going to get out. If it hadn't been for a couple of guys with a chain fall, I'd probably still be stuck there. They pulled my... They pulled my poor little Corolla out and told me I might want to think about something with four-wheel drive the next time I decided to come up here. I thanked them and set out again in search of this fiddle and its less than amiable owner. I love text-to-speech, but sometimes it puts weird... I don't know, like, it makes weird grammar choices sometimes. I had talked to a couple of people on the way up here, and most of them agreed that the only thing stranger than the fiddle was Ernest Slocum himself. They said that the Slocums had been musicians for as long as anyone could remember. The whole family was into bluegrass music, and almost all of them had been fiddlers. Ernest was the first one in about 5 generations with absolutely no talent for it. So instead of playing the fiddle, he showed it off. He started telling people that it was the secret to his family's success. He said the fiddle that he had was from the devil, and it was why his family was so renowned for their music talent. They'd had it since about the 1800s. Okay, the 1800s. And his great-great-great-great-grandfather had apparently sold his soul for it, and the talent. Other than that, they said he was a sour old man who was making money hand over fist, with the help of his cursed fiddle, of course, and all of them agreed that they had not only seen it, but that it was something to see. I pulled up outside his little shack at about 4:30 in the afternoon, and shack might have been too kind a term. I had seen a lot of strange dwellings in my time. The tent made out of ghost grass certainly comes to mind, but this place was like a broom closet with a roof. It looked like Ernest would be lucky to get a pot-bellied stove and a camp cot in there, and I imagined he could probably wake up in the morning and touch all 4 walls. The subject was sitting on the porch when I came up, picking his teeth and watching me make my way up his pitted driveway. He smiled, clearly hogging all of 5 teeth to himself, and got straight to business. "You 'ere what to see the fiddle, ain't you?" Took me a moment to decipher what he had said, and as it all came home, I found myself nodding. Yes, sir, I'm from Far Off Places, the travel magazine, and my editor said he talked to you about getting an interview and having a look at the fiddle." "Good to see you, Valinator. We're glad you could make it." "You're just in time. Story's just about to get good." "I'm glad somebody's still getting notifications. Apparently they're kind of touchy." Let's see. "Since Ewan's with the magazine, I ain't even gonna charge you, so long as you make it a good one." I told him I'd try my best, and he disappeared into his little house to get the fiddle in question. The man was on a good piece of land here. A lot of potential out here for growing, and just getting away from people, I supposed. I was a little jealous. I wished I had a place like this to disappear off to sometimes. Maybe even driving me nuts. I wished I had. Where was I? Maybe, when my writing was done, I'd pick up about 70 acres somewhere and just disappear off into ether, not either. Maybe, when my writing was done, I'd pick up about 70 acres somewhere and just disappear off into the ether and never have to talk to anybody or write anything weird ever again. Yeah, I thought, and maybe I'd win the lotto and go live on the moon while I was at it. The old guy came back with something wrapped in oilcloth, and when he unbound it, careful as any mother showing off her baby, I found myself gasping like a kid at a freak show. The fiddle was made of this buttery-looking dark wood, the kind of wood that looked like it would drink in the light if you let it. It was beautiful, the strings glistening in the late-day sun, and the frets looked like they might have been made by elves. But it went so far beyond that. The fiddle was somehow alien in its beauty, and I could imagine people believing that it had been crafted by a demon. As I stood there and looked at it, I imagined I could hear it whispering to me, and the things that it said were not altogether pleasant. It invited me to kill the old man and take the fiddle. It invited me to take it from him and play it. It assured me that he would never be able to stop me, and that I would be a much better holder of the fiddle than this fellow was. I very nearly listened to it a few times. I very nearly listened to it, but when the old man spoke, it seemed to break some of the illusion, and I looked up as if someone had spoken to me from a deep well. "She's pretty, ain't she?" "She certainly is," I answered lamely. "She talking to you, ain't she?" I didn't intend to, but I found myself nodding and agreeing that yes, she was indeed talking to me. "She tell you to hurt me, didn't she? She tell you to take ye and play real fine?" "Yes," I said, not even having the strength to lie. He laughed, and it sounded like a ghoul laughing from the bottom of a grave. "Heck, I knew he. She talked to everyone like that. You can try, if you won't, but you never do. I had her this long and intend to give her to my son someday. He at college now, music theorem, but he'll come back for the curse one of these days." "Why didn't you?" I asked, and he didn't seem to understand the question. "What?" "Why didn't you take up the curse? If there's no way around it, then how did you manage to avoid it?" I expected him to laugh, to shake his head and call me a fool, but he did neither of those things. Instead, he seemed to contemplate before he finally shrugged. "Never had the knack. I tried once or twice, but I always felt wrong in my hand. Maybe someday, but I expect not. It's safe as not." Even as he said it, I could see his eyes tracking down to it. Clearly there was a desire to play it, to own it, but he pushed it from him and folded it back into the square it came from. I could still hear it, though. Still hear that spidery voice as it spoke to me and asked me to take it up. No wonder he was so sad. If I had to listen to that thing tell me how I could be so much better. I would have damn near killed myself. That needs a period. There we go. I tried to give him money, but he shook his head and told me it wasn't necessary. I think you're the first time to understand what you seen. I think you're the first one to understand what you seen. You seen them before, ain't you? Stuff like that there. I nodded, telling him I had indeed seen a few things like that. He nodded at me soberly, told me to make sure I wrote up a good one when I wrote up the story. I assured him that I would, and I meant it. I couldn't help but write up anything. Nah, Kevin, you're just in time. I couldn't help but write up anything but a good one. He had shown me something truly amazing, and I wanted to do right by him when the time came. I had intended to come home. If I could friggin' read tonight. I had intended to come back to town, have a look at it, and then I had intended to come to town, have a look at it, and then be on my way. But something I hadn't anticipated happened. I didn't sleep well that night, despite the jet lag, and I found myself thinking about that fiddle. In my dreams, I saw myself picking it up and running my hand along the strings. I could hear the perfect notes that would play every time I slid the bow across it, and I found my pillow was wet the next morning, or I had cried just thinking about the sounds that it would make. It was weird because I wasn't usually wanting to get emotional like this, but something about the instrument had truly touched me. And in the morning, I found myself heading back to, back up to Slocum's house to see it again. Ernest Slocum did not seem surprised to see me, and he already had the fiddle out and lying across his lap. His hands seemed to shake as he looked down at it, and I realized he was pushing out a well of effort not to pick it up and play it. It must have been driving him insane, and I couldn't imagine what he was going through. "Figured you'd be back," he said, before spitting an impressive hock of chewing tobacco into the yard. "I'd wager you get a lot of return business, don't you?" "Some," he said with relish. "Some sees it and gets a fill. Other uns see it and won't another peek. Have you pegged them for ladders?" "Had you pegged for the ladders?" I was nodding, but I was unable to keep my eyes on the old man. All I could do was look at that fiddle, that magnificent instrument that yearned to be played, and I felt pity for it. It would never be used for its intended purpose, not as long as it stayed here. And it was something... There was something sad about that. Even if the instrument had been made by Satan himself, something like this deserved to be played. It deserved to be heard and loved and spoken about for years to come. It deserved to be listened to again and again and never forgotten for as long as anyone lived. How do you do it? How do you own something like that and never play it? He shrugged. "Takes some doing. Willpower and suchins. Don't hurt that I seen my daddy driven mad afore it by time." I asked him if he would tell me about it. A story for the article about not just the beauty of the fiddle, but also the danger of it. He nodded and said he would, but he would only tell it once. He said he had never told anybody this story, and he wasn't going to tell it again, no matter how much anybody asked. If you guys are just joining us, we're reading our first story of the night, which is Travel Tales, Fiddling in the Mountains. So I hope you guys are enjoying it. Hope you're not too confused by this guy's weird way of talking. He sounds like some of my relatives up in the hills. Seeing's better get it right the first time, he said. I told him I would, and he began his story. Keep in mind as you read this story, I had to translate a lot of it from his backwards English. Probably lost some of it in the translation, but it's as close as I could get. I have to sit up a little bit, I guess. Ugh. Okay, let's... Ernest said that when he was 15 years old, his father had been driven mad by the fiddle. Up until then, his daddy and the fiddle had always had a good relationship. His daddy said he would play the fiddle just enough to get the devil out of it, but not enough for the devil to get into him. Apparently, getting the devil into him was what killed his father, a man whom Ernest had never met. So, his daddy would go out on the road, playing his fiddle and making people happy. And then he would come home and put it down so that it didn't get too cozy, as he put it. Then, about 3 months before he died, his father had done something that he shouldn't have done. My daddy turned hard to the drink, and it make him weak. Ernest was never 100% sure why his father had decided to take up the drink. Ernest thought it might have had something to do with the fiddle, but he couldn't be sure. His father had always enjoyed a drink, but this was different. Ernest said his father seemed to be drinking to forget, though what he was trying to forget, Ernest could never really be sure of. In a way, he thought it had something to do with the fiddle, but his dad would never tell him, and Ernest was afraid to ask. Whatever the case, he would drink to excess, and one night he did something that sealed his fate. Ernest said that he woke up one night, right around his 15th birthday, and heard someone in the living room scuffling about. He had thought it might be a raccoon. They came in sometimes through a hole in the attic, and he had gone down to run it off before it got into the pantry. What he found was his father and the fiddle, both of them sitting in the living room as comfortable as kings. His father was naked, not even the usual undershorts that he would wear to bed, and he was stroking the neck of the fiddle in a way that made Ernest uncomfortable. It was the way some of the boys in his class talked about manipulating themselves in a way that made Ernest feel a little queasy, and he'd asked his father what he was doing. Daddy say, "Go to bed, boy. I'm speaking with the devil." He had gone right on stroking the neck of the fiddle in that way Ernest didn't like. But when he got up and made to head outside, Ernest didn't think he knew his son was still there. There. He said his daddy's eyes were glassy, and he looked like he was half asleep. He wasn't aware that Ernest was used to having to see his father, a man who was usually pretty well put together. Wait, what? That's got to change. That doesn't make any sense.
He wasn't aware. He wasn't aware that Ernest was used.
I see what it did there. It wasn't a way that Ernest was used to having to look at his father, a man who was usually pretty well put together, and he had followed him out into the yard and then into the woods. His father had still been naked, but it didn't really matter this far out into the woods. No one was going to see him any more than they would have seen Ernest, and Ernest had followed him until they came to a spot in the woods that looked burnt and unused. Ernest couldn't have said if it had been burnt by fire, or if something bad had simply come up out of the ground here. But whatever it was, his father had stopped there, so that the fiddle could do a little more talking. His father had held it up by the neck, close enough to his ear that Ernest thought he might be hearing it say something. And then he began to play. It was the best and worst that Ernest had ever heard his father play. He played like a man possessed, like a man on fire. And as he played, he laughed. He sounded like a dead man in his grave, but all I could do was listen. His father played every song he knew. Then he played a few that Ernest was pretty sure he didn't know. They were not the typical sort of bluegrass arrangements, and most of these were music that he would later think of as classical. Regardless, he played and played, and as the sun came up, he looked to the sky and played something that Ernest would never forget. What? I can't begin to tell you how he said it. His accent was so thick and broken at this point that I'm surprised I got anything out of it. But from what I gathered, it was something haunting and ethereal, and it sounded to Ernest like blasphemous cathedral music, the kind of thing you'd hear in a church on a night when you weren't supposed to be there. When the sun came up, fully came up, his father stopped playing and fell over dead. The laugh died in him, and he falled over. Just a second, guys. Bleeding over a little bit. Oh, okay. Okay. If you're just joining us, we're reading the Travel Writer Stories of Fiddle on the Mountain. It's his debut on the Monday track, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. Ernest went to his father, trying to get him to get up, but it was already too late. The doctor told him his heart had given out, but Ernest was pretty sure that the fiddle had taken his life from him. Ernest had wrapped his hands around the fiddle, more to get it out of the way than anything, and that was when he heard it talk to him for the first time. It promised that it could make him as good a fiddle player as his father had been, and for a moment, the boy had almost believed it. Then, he'd looked at his father, a man who the fiddle had probably made a similar promise to once upon a time, and he'd shaken his head and set it down. He had wrapped it in his father's shirt, and never touched it with any intent ever again. It still spoke to him, still begged him to play it, but he knew better than to attempt. But he knew better than to tempt fate in such a way. He kept it. He kept it safe, but he never let it go. Goad. Let it goad. He kept it. He kept it safe, but he never let it goad him into mischief, and he never would. Put that in your article and see how them like it, Ernest said when he was finished, spitting out more than tobacco juice and wrapping the fiddle in the oilcloth once again. I left money this time, not willing to take no for an answer. I went back to my hotel room, meaning to write the article again, but it was still very hard to start. I just kept thinking about that fiddle, thinking about all the lives it ruined, and wondering if it was something I should tell people about. What if some hapless bystander got a hold of that fiddle, and it did him harm? What if someone came and hurt Ernest and took it from him, and started a whole new lineage of people tied to that fiddle? I had my misgivings, but at the end of the day, I also had bills to pay. The article was going to be one of my best, whether I regretted it or not. There you go. That's the story. Ooh, sorry about that. Alrighty, we need another one. Let's see, what do we got here? Save those for last. Let's see. I think maybe we'll do our Kashmir story next. I'm glad you guys liked it. This one's going to be a little different from the Kashmir stuff. I had one in mind, and I'd actually already written it, but after, maybe. That would be a good tie-in. I don't know if many of you noticed, but today I had to post the Kashmir story because Wednesday's story got messed up. So if you're looking for last week's Kashmir story, I posted it today. So go have a look. It's about John Marvolo, who is the voice of Kashmir. Ooh, excuse me. And in there, they talk about a strange house that Sergeant Guthrie is looking into. And after re-recording it today, so that I could, get you guys your Wednesday story I'd promised you, I felt moved to write a little story about 728 Weimer Street. So that's next Wednesday's story, is 728 Weimer Street. And I hope you guys enjoy hearing about Sergeant Guthrie and the Kashmir Police Department. Okay, I need to know exactly what the hell is going on here. Sheriff Guthrie was standing out Let's try that again. Okay. I need to know exactly what the hell is going on here. Sheriff Guthrie was standing outside 728 Weimer Street. They had been there for most of the day, he and his two deputies, but they still knew very little. Their cars were arranged in the street, the blue and white lights pulsing slowly, and they were getting a lot of foot traffic from pedestrians who seemed to be going up and down the street as slowly as they could. If there was one thing that Sheriff Guthrie couldn't stand, worse than being called temporary Sheriff Guthrie, it was looky-loos. The people of Kashmir would get a full accounting as soon as he himself knew what was going on, and until then, they just better be patient. Grammarly has a very different way of spelling Kashmir, and I don't like it. Well, Officer Wood began, We got the call at about 8:15 this morning. It was because of all the screaming. People said it sounded like someone was getting gutted like a pig, but they weren't sure who. The residence had apparently been abandoned for nearly a decade, so there shouldn't be anybody there to scream. The last owners were the Duffys, and most people agree they didn't do a lot of screaming. They did a certain amount of other things, like cutting their grass too late at night, and Sheriff Guthrie pinched the bridge of his nose and tried not to scream at the man. Woods would have been better served working at Stragview. He was big, brutish, and kind of slow. A job at the prison would have probably been right up his alley. Unfortunately, he had managed to pass his policeman's exam and would forever be Guthrie's problem, it seemed. "Be easy on the boy," came a creepy old voice in his ear. "His daddy was one of the best deputies I ever had, right up until that moonshiner shot him in the back of the head. Damn waste." Guthrie didn't even flinch as the old spook gossiped. He had been haunted by the ex-sheriff of Kashmere for most of his career, and he wasn't going to let him drive it crazy now. Wait.
And he wasn't going to let him drive it crazy.
No, I flipped the... Try that one. And he wasn't going to let it drive him crazy just yet. He was sure that the old ghoul was standing over his shoulder, but looking would only make him look paranoid. "Officer Woods." And when he said it, his fellow deputy jumped a little. "I think we can move past the play-by-play. What I want to know is what's going on in the house right now." "Right," Officer Wood said as he flipped through his notebook. "Well, me and Pines arrived at the scene at about 8:30 and began dispersing the people who were on the scene. They had also heard the screaming and came to have a look, but we sent them off fairly easily. We then attempted to enter the residence, but the doors were locked and we did not have a way to gain entry." "Uh-huh," Guthrie said, spinning a finger to indicate he should go on. "Then what happened?" "Well, Pine suggested we go check out that big window around the front. There's a big picture window that looks in on the..." "Yes, I can see the window. Move it along." "Right, so we looked in the window, and that's when we seen all them people inside." "How many people would you say were inside?" "A whole bunch," Officer Woods said proudly. Guthrie had to restrain himself from strangling the man. He knew it wouldn't be the only time that day. "I need an exact number, Woods. This is going in the official paperwork, and they're going to want us to be exact." Officer Woods scratched his head like this was difficult work. Guthrie was... Try that again. Guthrie had actually inquired at the high school to see if there was something mentally wrong with the deputy, but he had been assured that Deputy Woods was as bright and capable as any other resident of Kashmere. Guthrie wasn't sure if that spoke more of Woods or less of the citizens of Kashmere, but he supposed he would have to do what he could with what he had. Pines wasn't a lot better. The man could be counted upon to come to work, but he was lazy once he managed to get here. If there had been any other prospects in Kashmir, Guthrie would have probably let both of them go and added 2 new guards to the ranks of Stagview. Unfortunately, the 6 deputies he had seemed to be all he was going to get, so he'd have to make the best of it. I guess there was about 6 of them. It's got to be some kind of... Sorry, guys, I'm getting a weird reverb out here. You guess or you know. I saw 6 people in the living room that were in danger. Guthrie looked up, fixing Officer Woods with a skeptical look. In danger? From what exactly? Oh, yeah, I forgot that part. There was a big animal in there with them, like a tiger or something. It was growling and snarling back at them, pushing them into the corner. They all seemed really scared, and it looked like they were all pretty sure they were going to die. It has the strangest... We're reading our Kashmir story for the week, if you're just joining us. It's about Sergeant Guthrie and his deputies, so... It's a pretty good time so far. Sheriff Guthrie closed his notebook and fixed Officer Woods with a highly skeptical look. So what you're saying is I need to put out an APB for a tiger. Deputy Woods immediately shook his head. No, not a tiger. This one was all black. So a panther then. I don't know, Leia. Did your dogs manage to make it into the story here? Deputy Woods scratched his head again, and Guthrie started to worry that he might wear a hole in it. Well, if it was the weirdest panther I've ever seen. And why is that? It, had sleek black skin and no eyes. Sheriff Guthrie rolled his eyes, wondering if he needed to drug test Woods before he could let him go back to work. He had heard some cockamamie stories, but this one was a real doozy. He was supposed to believe that some weird, eyeless creature had attacked a family of 6 in the house. What was he going to do? Put out an APB for some kind of weird animal without eyes? This was ridiculous, but it was also Kashmir, and he knew that weird things sometimes happened here. Just because he had never seen some eyeless cat creature out in the woods didn't mean that it didn't exist. He would need to get a look at the house first before he could say anything, and he decided that he would need to be... may need... I got off my track there. Hang on.
He decided.
He decided that that would need to be his next step if this investigation was to go any further. Have you managed to get into the house yet? Oh, well, no, sir. We didn't have a warrant, and... Woods, how many times do we have to go over this? If you watch a bunch of people get mauled to death by an animal in their home, you don't need a warrant. He had begun heading for the house, practically running, and Woods was right behind him. Pines was on the front porch, standing guard against anyone who might decide they wanted a closer look, and when he saw the sheriff coming, he stood up like he absolutely had not been having a nap up until that point. Guthrie didn't have the time to reprimand anybody today. He needed to assess what was going on in this house, and pretty quickly, too. He went to the window where Woods said he had seen several people being eaten up. And when he got there, what he found was not a pile of dismembered bodies, but a house party in full swing. Woods, your dead people look awfully lively for a group that's been killed by a big cat. Woods stood there, shaking his head in disbelief. I swear, I watched that cat eat 'em up. What's more, it's even the same group of people. Sheriff Guthrie had to admit this was not the sort of party he had expected to find here. It wasn't the sort of house party that one usually expected outside of Halloween. Everyone inside was in costumes, like they... the kind you would expect to see in a roaring 20s party. And they were all standing around, drinking from champagne flutes as they toasted whatever event was going on. It was a pretty swanky affair, he had to admit, but it definitely wasn't a bunch of dead people who had been eaten up by a giant cat. One look at the clock also told Guthrie that something else was amiss. The clock on the mantelpiece said that it was 1:45 and Guthrie hadn't even had his lunch yet. Has anybody tried to make contact with anyone in the house? Both deputies shook their heads, and Guthrie took it upon himself to rap his knuckles against the window. When the people inside made no indication that they had heard or seen him, he did it again. By the third knock, it became apparent that they either couldn't see him or were the biggest bunch of assholes he had ever met. So these people definitely were not having a party when you saw them, he asked Woods. Nope, but it's the same bunch of people. I recognize a few of them, though they were a little less put together the last time I saw them. Suppose being mauled to death will do that to a person, Guthrie quipped. As the clock struck midnight, something Guthrie couldn't hear so much as see, something changed inside the party. A woman put a hand over her mouth and screamed. At least that's what it looked like. And Guthrie watched as a large, angry-looking animal stepped around the corner and into the living room. It was a big son of a bitch, easily 5 feet high on all fours, and it began ripping into the guests like a battering ram. People ran and screamed. A few of them hit the window and began banging their fists on it. And as the 3 policemen watched the carnage unfold, Guthrie was the first one to snap back to reality. Get this door open now, he shouted, pulling his gun as he approached. Woods kicked the door 4 good times, and as it burst open, the deputies piled in with the sheriff in tow, greeted with nothing but an empty living room. What the hell? Guthrie said quietly, as the 3 of them moved around looking for clues. The room was devoid of anything. There was no furniture, no trash, not even the leavings of people who break into a place to make out or stay for a couple of nights. The walls were so bare they were nearly stark, and Guthrie was tempted to move back out onto the porch and see if the scene was still unfolding. What is this? What is this, old man? If the ghost of Sheriff Masterson knew, he did not say. Guthrie put his service pistol away, turning to the 2 deputies as he prepared to give orders. That was when his eyes fell on a long scratch on the floor, and he suddenly wondered if it had been made by careless movers or the claws of something large and terrifying. I want tape around the whole place. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. What do we tell people? Woods was asking as he put away his own revolver and looked around the house like a kid inside a haunted mansion. We don't tell them a damn thing. It's none of their business. It's nobody's business but ours. He walked shakily back to his squad car, but he couldn't help one last glance at the front glass of that big picture window. Woods and pines were already putting up the tape, and from here, the window looked normal. "I've always said that Kashmir is one hell of a place," said Sheriff Masterson from the back seat. Sheriff Guthrie ignored him as he drove back to the station. There would be paperwork to file, and it would have to be doctored to make sure it looked absolutely perfect. Just because weird stuff happened didn't mean the paperwork didn't have to make sense. And that is our Kashmir story for the week. Man, we are cruising right along here. How did we get on pineapples? Good. Oh, hey, Kathleen. We're glad you could make it. Let's see. All right. This week's Friday story is a brand new Dr. Winters story. And I'm going to go ahead and warn some of you guys. This one has some subject matter that if you're not prepared for, I will not hold against you. This one involves some child trafficking. So, yeah, I know. It's a weird angle for Dr. Winters. But this week on Dr. Winters, she breaks up the scariest thing of all, which is a child trafficking ring. So, if you're not in the mindset for that, again, I totally understand. But it's called Hollow Devils, and it's going to star our very own Dr. Winters. So, I do hope you enjoy. There you go. Allergies are killing me this week, I swear. Your mother tells me you're seeing monsters. Let's talk about these monsters. Angela... excuse me. Can't eat anything, I swear. Angela Blake was about 9 years old, and her mother had heard about the Forgetfulness Clinic on the radio and decided to bring her daughter for an appointment with Dr. Winters. There was nothing wrong with her daughter. She made that very clear, but she was worried about the frequency with which her little girl was talking and dreaming about monsters. Dr. Winters wasn't particularly worried. Kids talked about monsters all the time, but the mother was paying for results, and she supposed she would help her get them. I don't like the way that sounded. She would help her get them. She would help her get... that sounds even worse. She would help her get them. You wouldn't believe me, the little girl in the sage green dress said morosely. Adults never do. Well, most adults wouldn't. But I happen to have some experience with monsters, and I can assure you that if you're honest with me, I'll be able to help you. The little girl looked at her with such naked hope that it almost hurt Dr. Winters to stare at her. Many kids were afraid of the usual monsters under the bed, or the classic monster in the closet, but this kid looked like she had a little bit more on her mind than imaginary bugaboos. This little girl looked hopeful that Dr. Winters might be able to make the monsters go away. "You promise?" "I will try my best." Angela told her that the monsters she was afraid of weren't the kind that lived under the bed or in the closet. They weren't the kind of monsters that would become piles of clothes when no one was looking. They weren't the kinds of monsters that were just shadows on the wall. The monsters she was afraid of were real, and they had taken some of her friends. They got Jenny last year. They got Jerry 6 months ago. They took Melissa a couple of months after that. And Wendy, they took her just before school starts. Ugh. They took her just before school started. Alright. They always come around for a few days before they take someone. Once they decide whose turn it is, they come and get them, and no one ever does anything about it. This made Dr. Winters raise an eyebrow. This was a little more serious than childhood fears. If children were actually going missing, then it was something that she might be able to fix in a very different way. "Angela, where are these people from?" "I don't know, but they always come around in their black vans, and they always wear masks." "What kinds of masks?" Dr. Winters asked, making notes. "Animal masks. At first I thought they were funny. One of them was a bear, one of them was a fox, one of them was a snake, and that one was a little scary, but one of them was a big friendly dog, and when he asked Wendy to come with him, she went." "Why did Wendy go with the dog man?" Dr. Winters asked. "Because she thought he was her friend. She didn't know that he was nobody's friend. They're all bad men, and they all take children whether they want to go or not." "Have you told your mother about these men?" Angela nodded, her eyes hooded like she was half in a dream. "Some of the grown-ups know about the animal people. They know about them, and they don't do anything because the animal people have something they need. Most of the time, the adults act like they don't know anything about the animal people. They act like it's a game and like it's all make-believe when we tell them." Dr. Winters was nodding along, pretty sure she knew what sort of people Angela was talking about. "Where are these animal people? Do you know?" Angela shook her head. "Nobody does. Nobody knows who they are, or if they do, they pretend they don't. I'm scared, though. That's why my mommy brought me here." "Why are you scared, Angela?" Dr. Winters could think of a good number of reasons to be scared in this situation, but sometimes it helped if they could tell you themselves. "Because last week, while I was playing on the playground at school, I looked up and there was one of the masked people standing at the fence. I didn't know him, but he had on the dog mask, and he just kept staring at me. I looked at him, and he looked at me as if he was completely unafraid." "He put his hands against the fence. He gripped the chains, and I just knew that some night that man was going to come and get me. That's why I've been having nightmares. That's why I haven't been eating. That's why my mommy brought me here. Can you help me? I don't want to be afraid anymore, and Mommy says that you can help me not be afraid." Dr. Winters sat down her notebook and smiled at Angela. "Yes, I believe I can help you. Do you and your mommy live in Kashmir?" Angela shook her head. "No, Mommy and I live in Pritchard." Dr. Winters was nodding. That made sense. Pritchard was less of a town and more of a trailer park with infrastructure. It was a miserable little place, not a place you would want to raise a child, but she supposed that some people really didn't have a lot of choice where they lived. They did have a lot of choice, and yeah, if I could read. They did have a lot of choice about whether or not the local monsters got to hurt their children, and for that, Dr. Winters could not forgive the mother. How could something like that be going on and no one be aware? It boggled the mind, but Dr. Winters was going to put a stop to it. By the end of the day, Dr. Winters was going to put a stop to a lot of things. Listen to me, Angela. I need you to do me a favor. Okay, Angela said, sounding small and scared. I need you to tell your mommy that we had a lovely session and that you aren't afraid anymore. I need you to tell her that I made all your fears go away and now you feel much better. But I want you to know that after today, you'll have nothing to be afraid of from those animal mask people. I'm going to go talk to them, and I think they'll listen to me. Angela started to get upset, but Dr. Winters put a hand over the little girl's and smiled at her. You have my word. I'll make them see why it's not a good idea to bother children of any sort. And if you ever see any of them again after today, you call me, and I'll come have another talk with them. Angela threw her arms around Dr. Winters and hugged her fiercely. Whether or not she believed that Dr. Winters could make the bad people go away, Dr. Winters didn't know. Hang on. That sentence didn't really make a lot of sense. She had still made her feel safe. Pamela wanted to help the girl, but Winter wanted the kind of justice that you often only saw in westerns. Winter wanted revenge. The two of them didn't always see eye to eye on things, but when it came to the safety of children, the two of them were in perfect agreement. Marguerite picked up on the seventh picked up on the second ring. My love, is something the matter? I have to make a house call. I'm afraid I might need your help. There was silence on the other end of the line, but Pamela had known Maggie long enough to hear the smile behind that silence. I have a feeling that this house call will be a dinner date, mayhaps. I have a feeling you might be right. Will you come with me? My love, I would come with you to the gates of hell. She agreed to meet Dr. Winters at her clinic after closing time, and Pamela said her goodbyes before hanging up. Justice would have to wait. She still had a full workload to make her way through before then. Goodness. This is why I love my community. You guys have such spirited conversations. We're working our way through our Dr. Winters story right now, so if you guys are just joining us, it's about to get good, so have a seat. Dr. Winters knocked 5 times on the door of the club, and the footsteps from inside were thunderous. Whoever was inside, they had clearly not expected guests, and that was good. Winter didn't want to be expected. Winter wanted to be a complete surprise when they opened the door to find a petite woman in her early 30s standing there waiting for them. Above all else, Winter loved surprising people. I like them too, Valinator. I'm really glad that this series took off like it did. They had gone to the park first, the park where Angela had said some of her friends had gone missing. They had looked around, Winter using her powers to find any residual fear or anger, and finally she found what she had been looking for. If the latest little girl had been taken a day or so later, it might have been It might not have been as viable, but the sense of fear and lust was enough to sting her nose as she followed it. The little girl hadn't wanted to go. None of them wanted to go. But there was something else that Winter almost remembered. That feeling of loyalty to one's family. The feeling that if she didn't go, then someone she loved would have to go in her place. Whoever these people were, they were the most hideous kind of vultures. And Winter was about to show them there was a much larger predator, much closer than they thought. The place the trail had led them to was the kind of club where desperate men found themselves when they needed companionship. It was the kind of place women found themselves when they needed a job and their resumes weren't the cleanest. It was not a bad place, but it was a place that could become bad, and Winter was not a fan of it. She knew many of them were dens for drugs and worse things, and if this was the sort of place these animal mask people congregated, then it needed to be shut down. The man who opened the door could have been an extra on The Sopranos, and Maggie and Dr. Winters pushed past him and into the back room of the Silver Lining like they had been invited. "Whoa, hey there, where do you think you're going?" Winter didn't stop or speak to him. And if he... As, not if.
Winter didn't.
Try that one again. Oh, no. Winter didn't stop or speak to him, and as she came into the back room, she saw 5 men sitting around a card table as they anteed and dealt. She had seen some of them on the news, members of the town council or prominent members of the community, or as prominent as they could get in a place like this. One of them was the sheriff, another one was the acting mayor, 2 more were councilmen, and one of them was the head of the largest construction outfit in the area. They had probably passed this man. No. "Hey, Scully, glad you could join us." Okay. They had probably passed his man on the way in, but it mattered very little. They looked up at her with confusion and with a sick sort of hope, and Winter was going to enjoy wiping it off their faces. "Frank, you didn't tell us you'd ordered entertainment for the evening. Doesn't appear to be enough of them to go around, so I guess we'll have to share." Dr. Winter smiled, and it was icy. "Oh, don't worry. There's more than enough of us to go around. Are you the animal-masked men who've been holding this town hostage?" She hadn't needed to ask. All of the masks from Angela's story were hanging on the wall of this place, as if they were just waiting to be put on. The snake, the fox, the bear. There was a wolf mask, which she hadn't mentioned, and the one beside it was... was the one she'd been looking for. It was the friendly-looking dog, the one she had remembered, and the one that made Dr. Winters absolutely livid. She imagined that the speaker, the one who had started talking, was probably the one who wore the dog mask, and she wondered how many children had gone willingly with that friendly-looking face. "Sure are," the speaker said, as though he were proud of it. "You're looking at the real city council for this town. Why, you looking to renegotiate whatever Frank promised you?" "No," Dr. Winters said, almost kindly. "I'm going to make sure that I get the..." Flubbed it. "I just wanted to make sure I got the right dead men." They both shed their glamour then, and any thoughts the assembled men might have had about what was going to happen fled from their minds. One of them drew a gun, but Winter already had her hand around his throat. The gun barked twice before she felt his windpipe collapse. Something buzzed against her skin, and she turned to find the sheriff pointing a shaky revolver at her. Behind her, Maggie had torn the guts out of one of them and was bent over another as she drank his blood. The fifth, the man who had opened the door, was trying to run, but his hands were having trouble opening the door. She looked back at the sheriff, and her smile was enough to make him wet himself. The man stopped trying to get out the door as the sheriff's body slammed into him, crushing him against the metal portal. "Hey, Nancy, we're glad you could make it." "Nah, there's still a couple more stories left." The two women ripped their little poker game apart like a hurricane, and it would have been nearly impossible to identify any of them without dental records. The room was bathed in blood, none of them lasting more than a few minutes, and when they finished, they went looking for the victims they knew would be somewhere. They found a few of them in a cage in the back room. It was a cage meant for an animal, for dogs, and these men had lost children. Had placed lost children in them. Where? As if it were the most normal thing in the world. They had taken them, most of them barely in grade school, and marked them with the intent of sending them as far from their parents and guardians as they could manage. It was one of many things that made Dr. Winters' blood boil. And as she released them and assured them they would be fine, that's when the blue and white lights approached. The police from Pritchard never saw the people who had massacred their standing city council. But the return of the town's children seemed to give them new resolve to fight what little of it remained. Strange news out of Pritchard. It seems that the city council, as well as the sheriff and one of the largest construction magnates in the area, were killed last night before being implicated in a child abduction ring that had been providing children to sex traffickers. Several children were returned to their families, but temporary Sheriff August Manderley says the department will be working hard to find the rest. He claims he had no idea of the sheriff's actions, and the department is scrambling to get out in front of what is assuredly a PR nightmare. Scary stuff, Juliet said, as she noticed Dr. Winters standing by the counter. Really makes you look at people a little differently, doesn't it? Dr. Winters said nothing, only smiling as she returned to her office to complete some paperwork. Juliet was better off not knowing she had been involved. It wasn't often that she and Maggie got to indulge in their baser natures, but it was always nice when the nature could help serve the community. Even if it hadn't, Dr. Winters liked knowing that one little girl would be sleeping a lot more soundly tonight when she wasn't being haunted by the face of a terrible, smiling old pervert. Those masks now hung in her office, though they would have to come down if Sheriff Guthrie ever decided to make a surprise visit. She wanted them close by, so she could be sure they would never be used against anyone again. And she also wanted them as a keepsake, so she didn't forget why she fought so hard. It was good to remember exactly what it was all for sometimes, especially when your strength might be waning. Alrighty, that is our Dr. Winters story for the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a little bit different, but, Dr. Winters sometimes goes up against some topical issues as well. Alrighty. Oh no. Like I said, I always like to see you guys up to spirited conversation there. Alrighty, let's see. I think we're just down to our short stories this week. So we're going to go with the scariest story of all. A story about therapy. Let's see here. So, this next story is called Dr. Bailey Made My Problems Go Away. So, let's have a listen. Oh, hey, Misbehave, we're glad you could make it. Just in time for the short stories. About 6 months ago, I was struggling with a lot of problems. My coworkers weren't exactly treating me the way I felt they should be. My girlfriend wasn't really there for me, and I suspected she was cheating. I was gone most of the day, and then she would go out at night, right before I needed to go to bed, saying she just wanted to see some friends. She'd come home right as dawn was breaking, and then sleep sometimes until I got home from work. Not to mention, despite having a pretty good job, we were perpetually broke. My dad was always on my case about promoting my friends. Sorry. Promoting my friends were always... Yeah. Let's just try that whole thing again. My dad was always on my case about promoting. My friends were always on my case about me being 30 and still living like a 20-year-old. And I just didn't feel very supported. Except for one friend. My friend L. L knew what I was going through because he'd been going through it for years himself. He'd been hip deep in depression last year, but he said he knew just who could get me through it. He pulled a business card out of his pocket and slid it across the table to me, his smile a little too inviting as he begged me to flip it over. I expected to find the number of an escort agency or even a suicide prevention hotline, but it was a business card for a therapist, Dr. Bailey of the Bailey Therapy Group. He's the best, Elle said. He just makes all your problems go away. I thought about it for a while and finally decided, what harm could it do? The business card said the first 30 minutes were free, so if I wasn't satisfied, then all I'd lost was half an hour. I called to make sure it was real. Elle did sometimes like to play games, and when the receptionist said that they had an opening on Thursday, I decided to give it a try. His office was modest, the kind of place that probably used to be a dry cleaner, and I came in to find him adjusting couch cushions as he smiled and told me to have a seat. Dr. Bailey was an odd... Dr. Bailey was an odd guy. I don't mean like he was eccentric or anything, but most therapists you see in movies wear button-down shirts and slacks. They have ponytails and thick glasses. They wear sensible shoes, and they tell you most of your problems are connected with your parents. Dr. Bailey looks like he might have been a student of Weird Al Yankovic. He wore a colorful shirt in an eye-watering style, a pair of ripped blue jeans, and shoes that looked like they might have started out life in a clown car. And... bah. He had a thick set of mutton chops, a white guy afro, and reading glasses that he constantly kept on the bridge of his nose. The guy couldn't have hidden in a Jackson Pollock painting, but something about his smile put me at ease as he asked me what he could help me with. I don't know, I told him honestly. I guess there's an... I heard October Libras down there. Who's talking about me? I guess there's a lot of depression at play. Maybe I feel a little worthless, and people think what I need is to come and talk to someone like you. Dr. Bailey told me to sit down, and that was a fine place to start. Why don't you start by telling me what brings you to this feeling of worthlessness? What really fuels the idea that you have no worth? I guess it all starts with my job, Doc, I said, taking a seat on the couch and getting comfortable. That's a good place. What do you do for work? I work in an IT department at a big logistics company. My coworkers think that I'm just some computer pusher, some guy that plugs in computers and unplugs the internet. I don't think any of them realize what I actually do for the company. One of them in particular has really started busting my balls about server speeds and download times. Does this coworker have a name? Oh, cool. Well, happy early birthday, Leah. Mine's on the 1st. Hey, Nancy. Good of you to make it. I paused, feeling a little weird about just divulging someone's name to someone I just met, but Dr. Bailey was a therapist, and that was part of the job, right? Rich, I answered. Richard Emanuel, the king of the 3rd floor, because he handles all the top clients. His uncle founded the company, and it seems to be mostly run on nepotism these days. Rich has about 5 guys under him that basically just clean up his messes all day. When it comes time for reviews, however, Rich is always the one to get the pats on the back. He's the one who takes care. If I could talk today. Nice. He's the one who takes credit for everybody else's work, including mine sometimes. I ended up talking about Rich for most of the first hour, and when I was done, Dr. Bailey asked if I felt any better. I found that I actually did. It made me feel a lot better to talk about it, and I thanked him and agreed to set up another session. Walking out of that office made me feel light, made me feel good, and I found myself looking forward to the next session in 2 weeks. That good feeling persisted into the next day. When I arrived to find people talking in hushed voices, I was curious to see what was going on. It seemed that Rich hadn't showed up this morning, which wasn't odd, but he had a big presentation that they had needed him to get out in front of. No one was quite sure where he was. They had called his house. They had gone to the country club where he sometimes played golf early in the morning. They had gone to any number of women's houses who he had claimed to be intimate with, but no one could find him. His uncle was getting a little worried, but tried to smooth it over by saying this wasn't uncommon for Rich. "He'll turn up in a few days," Mr. Morgan said, but I could tell from looking at him that he probably didn't believe what he was saying. Okay. When I went to my next appointment with Dr. Bailey, Rich still hadn't turned up. I know some people at the office were worried about him, but I had honestly had the best 2 weeks of my life. Rich had been really writing me about download speeds on the server. God only knew why. And it was nice not to have him in my office every hour or so to ask if I had done something about it. Rich was another one who liked to bypass the firewall as well, so not having to clean up daily after him was kind of a plus. I suppose I was a little bit worried about him, but not enough to go out pounding the pavement looking for him. Dr. Bailey must have noticed because he mentioned that I looked happier. Well, it's the strangest thing. Do you remember the guy I told you about last week? The one who was bothering you at work? Rich. Yeah, he just sort of stopped coming to work. Nobody has seen him, and he simply hasn't shown up for 2 weeks. I don't want to say I'm glad he's gone, but it's been a lot nicer without him. I see. And how has that helped your mental state? I lay there for a minute, thinking about how to answer. Being rid of Rich was nice, but it wasn't the only thing on my mind. Now that work was back on track, I had more time to focus on problems at home. My girlfriend, we'll call her Kay, had really been on it lately. It was always about money with her, and it seemed like I never made enough of it. Kay wanted me to propose to her. She made that pretty clear, but she doesn't want any old ring, and certainly nothing I could afford. She wants something gaudy and expensive, and it's just a little bit out of my price range these days. Ugh. I conveyed this to Dr. Bailey, and he nodded and scribbled on a pad of paper before asking me questions about our relationship. How long had we been seeing each other, what Kay did for work, what she brought to the household, and whether or not she was helping me with my mental journey. It was pretty eye-opening, really made me think about the relationship a little different. And when he told me my hour was up, I was feeling like I might have some strategies to help fix what was wrong. It was probably not going to happen. I was too much of a coward to enact any of it, but it was nice to have them nonetheless. I got a text from Kay as I was leaving the therapist office, telling me that she was working late and was probably going to miss dinner. I decided to do a little something for myself and got takeout instead. I got some of that really good Chinese food from the place I like near my house, put my favorite show on Netflix, which Kay usually doesn't want to watch, and had a nice night just sitting on the couch, eating and watching something that made me happy. I fell asleep right there on the sofa with a little bit of beef and broccoli in the corner of my mouth, and it was a wonder I didn't choke to death in my sleep. When I woke up the next morning to find that Kay still wasn't home, I looked around the apartment for signs of her. Her keys and her purse were missing, though. I got a little freaked out and started calling her friends, her parents, anyone to see if she had crashed with one of them last night. Sometimes, when she works late, she crashes with different people, and these frantic mornings of trying to seek her out really aren't that uncommon. No one had seen her, though. I even called her work, and they said as far as they knew, she had gone home last night, and her car wasn't even in the lot. I called the office after that, not really having a lot of options, and when I settled in to see if I could figure out something. Sorry, guys. Got a line down there somehow.
Called the office.
I called the police after that, not really having a lot of options. And then I settled in to see if I could figure anything out. In the end, I just got dressed and went to work, same as I did every day. 2 weeks later, as I went to my next appointment with Dr. Bailey, there was still no sign of Kay, and some of the pep was definitely out of my step. "You certainly don't seem as happy as you did last time," Dr. Bailey said, as I sat down on the couch. "No, something happened to my girlfriend. The one I had been talking about last session is what I didn't say. It was something that I hadn't really thought about, but there was still no sign of Rich, and now Kay had gone missing. They hadn't known each other, so I couldn't exactly call it a coincidence, but the coincidence here was that I'd told Dr. Bailey about them. I shook it off, though. I was just being paranoid. This whole thing with Kay had my head spinning, and I just needed some grounding, and good old Dr. Bailey was going to get me through it, hopefully." "Well, if you don't mind me saying so, it sounds like some of the stressful things in your life are starting to migrate elsewhere. Maybe that's for the best. You had said that these people were a large part of your mental health struggles, so maybe they shouldn't be there. Have you felt stressed by your girlfriend's actions in the last 2 weeks?" Started to get a little angry, but he wasn't wrong. Excuse me. Let's see. Actually, things have been a little less hectic around the house. Kay's parents came and got most of her stuff, and I haven't had to fight with her about chores or bills or anything lately. No one has hit me up for money in almost 2 weeks, and I haven't had to clean up a mess in the bathroom after she got ready for girls' night either. I've been sleeping a lot better without her constantly tossing and turning all night, too. It sounds terrible, I know, but yeah, I guess things have been a little better." "Good, good," Dr. Bailey said. Meh. I mean, I know how to. I just try not to do it in the microphone. It sounds like we're making some real progress here. Let's move on to other outlying stressors. Is there anything else in your life that brings you stress? I was going to say that there really wasn't a lot of stress left in my life. But then I remembered the conversation I'd had this morning with my dad. My dad had called me at 6 a.m., like he so often does, and had been flabbergasted at the idea that I was still asleep. Dad's been retired for about 5 years, and in that 5 years, he had forgotten that people work, that offices keep business hours, and that people like to stay up past 8 o'clock at night and sleep past 5 in the morning. It was a conversation that we'd had many times, but this time, Dad decided to get a little personal, and I really didn't appreciate it. No wonder your girlfriend left you. You sleep all day, and then you go to work and play with computers. What? Who wants a man like that? The worst part was that I couldn't even deny it. I just said, and mumbled my way through my conversation with him until he got tired and hung up. I loved my dad, but he was certainly a big stressor in my life, and I told Dr. Bailey so. He thinks he knows everything. He doesn't speak to anyone. He just talks at them. He doesn't want a conversation. He just wants someone to tell him he's right. It's maddening. I don't know why he calls me every day just to yap at me, like some little dog that sits at the door and barks. Oh, but God forbid you don't pick up the phone, because then he's going to leave you a passive-aggressive voicemail telling you how he doesn't have many more years left and you should talk to him while you can. Maybe I would want to talk to him if he actually took an interest in anything I have an interest in. I know he doesn't like that I work in IT, but I'm paying my bills. I don't ask him for money like my brother does all the time. I think I'm doing pretty well, and I wish he could see that. Dr. Bailey said little beyond making agreeable noises and scratching things on a notepad. I honestly felt great. I wanted... It honestly felt great to talk to somebody about my dad. It was something I'd tried not to think about for the longest time, and finally letting go and telling someone how I felt about it gave me a confidence boost like nothing I'd ever seen. I made a mental note to call my dad and tell him exactly how I felt. I thanked Dr. Bailey for his help and made an appointment for another session in 2 weeks. I was feeling on top of the world, really putting in the work, and I decided to call Dad and hash it out with him before I lost my nerve. But when I called my parents' house, my mom told me that Dad wasn't around. He and your uncle went to the lake for their monthly fishing trip. You know how they are about that. It's the only thing he sets a clock by anymore. I doubt you'll get him out there. The reception's terrible, but if it's important, you can tell me, and I'll pass it along to him. Oh, Lordy. I gotta get a drink of something. I can assure you, Misbehave, the story is not autobiographical. I'm not calling anybody out here. I told Mom I'd just talk to him when he came back into town, and to tell him to call me. She said that she would, and we said our goodbyes. I felt a little bad. I'd really wanted to talk to Dad before I thought better of it, but I knew he'd be back by Sunday, so I could talk to him then. Sunday night, Mom called me again, and she said she was worried about my dad and Uncle Rick. He's always back before dinner time on Sunday. I'm getting really worried. He's never stayed out this late on one of these fishing trips. I told her they probably just had some car trouble and they couldn't get a hold of anybody because they were out in the woods. I told her that if he wasn't back by morning time, I'd call out of work. Oh, I didn't know that. Dang. I really meant for it just to be the letter K, because he's keeping it kind of vague.
All out of work.
And go out to the little fishing shack they had out there and check on him myself. That seemed to make her feel a little better, and she thanked me before hanging up. Well, the next morning, he still wasn't back, so I called work and told him I was taking a personal day so that I could go check on something. I drove out to the fishing camp, which was what we had called it ever since I was little, but there was no sign of Dad or Uncle Rick. I couldn't believe that they would drive home and not tell Mom, but as I drove back up and down the road looking for sign of them, I began to think a little harder about the events of the past month and a half. I told Dr. Bailey about Rich, and then he went missing. Told Dr. Bailey about Kay, and then suddenly she went missing. Told Dr. Bailey about Dad, and then suddenly he was gone. These were things I should have been putting together all along, but it felt nice to have that kind of confidence, the kind of confidence I had after sessions. And I suppose I overlooked it. I was someone who wasn't used to having confidence, so I guess maybe that made it easier to look past. It's a piss-poor excuse, but it's mine, and I'll hang on to it, thanks. I didn't really think my therapist had anything to do with their disappearances anyway. Dr. Bailey was a little guy, not particularly intimidating, and it would have taken a lot of effort to disappear 3 fully grown people. The longer I drove up and down that stretch of road between my parents' house and the fishing shack, looking for signs that they'd had an accident, the less sure of that fact I became. Instead of calling Dr. Bailey, though, I called L, the one who had started all of this, and asked him to meet me at my apartment. He'd been Dr. Bailey's patient for longer than I had, so maybe he could put my mind at ease. Maybe he could tell me something that would help me put this in perspective and not feel so damn crazy. He said he'd come over that afternoon, and when he did, he looked at me with something like foreboding. Foreboding, but also pity. That's a much better word. I've got to ask, how has Dr. Bailey helped you? He sat down on my couch like he'd been expecting this. He's helped me with my depression, self-confidence, and given me some perspective on people in my life. What kind of perspective? I asked hesitantly. He's helped me see that I'm better off without some of these people. And he's helped me cut them loose so that my mental health can improve without them. Did you cut them loose? Or did Dr. Bailey? He turned his head to look at me, giving me that same creepy smile as before. Is that what happened to Kay? I nodded. Yeah, I think he had something to do with it, but I'm not sure how Dr. Bailey is doing this. He's kind of a dweeb. The idea of him getting rid of 3 people is laughable. laughable, but not very funny. He's only gotten rid of 2 people for me, but the guy who told me about Dr. Bailey said he had gotten rid of nearly a dozen for him when he had a similar conversation. When we had a similar conversation. I felt my anger rising. So you knew that would happen? I did. I also knew that someone was giving you trouble at work. I also knew that Kay was bleeding you dry and stringing you along. I assumed that they were the main culprits who were hurting your mental health, and I figured Dr. Bailey would do some good. I sighed as I sat down on the couch beside him. It would have been fine if he stopped with that, but he's got my dad too, and maybe my Uncle Rick. I didn't intend for any of this to happen. I didn't want to hurt people. I just wanted to feel better. He patted my shoulder. That's what he does. He makes people feel better. He got a guy at my work who was bullying me. Real high school shit. And then he made him go away. I felt like a brand new man. I hadn't intended to tell him about my sister, the one who's in grad school, been there for like 8 years now and refuses to do anything with it, but it just came spilling out. I talked about how she was the golden child, how she got everything she wanted, and how she had taken my college fund when my parents thought she needed it more. I was so mad at her, and when she disappeared, I really felt it for the first time. I didn't feel that wave of confidence or those good feelings that I had when my bully had been taken away. I was distraught. My parents were upset because their child was gone, but that was when I realized what I had done. I asked Dr. Bailey if he had made my sister disappear, and all he did was smile. He smiled for nearly 20 minutes, and then he asked if I wanted to... I can't talk tonight. If I wanted to schedule another session. If I wanted to schedule another session. I did. Despite how I felt about him, I did. I've been continuing to go for the last 1.5 years, but I'm very careful about who I talk about. It makes me look at my relationships a lot differently. It makes me interact with people a lot differently. It'll affect you too, whether you continue to go to him or not. I've been sitting on my couch ever since he left and staring at the appointment card in my hand. Dr. Bailey has really helped me improve. He's made me a whole new man, but I'm not sure I can get past the knowledge of what he's done. Here's the other part, the part that really scares me. I called my insurance company to make sure there weren't any weird charges that might point to him charging me for body disposal or making people go away. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I found. Nobody in his position is going to write out a bill. Hang on. Got a weird sentence there. There we go. But my insurance seemed surprised that I was asking about therapy. They had never been billed by a therapist. They had never been billed by anyone named Dr. Bailey. And I'd just been going for free therapy for the last month and a half. I don't know if I should go back or not, but my friend was right about one thing. Knowing that Dr. Bailey could disappear anyone for the slightest reason makes me really question my friendships. Words have power, something we all know, but don't take for granted. We take that for granted sometimes. Be careful what you talk about when you're lying on the couch. You never know when you'll find a Dr. Bailey of your own. There we go. That is Dr. Bailey. Made my problems go away. All right. We got one more story, I think. And then it's going to be time for me to say bye-bye. Yeah, don't go see Dr. Bailey. There you go. Let's see. What else we got here? This one is called Mucklows. And it's a story about some weird creatures and some weird symbols. So, this one's going to close us out, and I hope you enjoy. Oh, it was definitely a little longer than usual, Blondie. Like, some of these have become pretty big. Alright, this one's called Mucklows, so I hope you like it. I've been seeing them for most of my life, but the first time I remember asking my grandpa about them, I guess I was a 4 or 5. I guess I was about 4 or 5. Grandpa, what's that thing hanging off the fence? Grandpa looked, and it was kind of weird, seeing his face fall like that. I've seen Grandpa stare down a mad bull more times than I could count. And when the man in rags had been living in the barn, Grandpa had run him off without even raising his voice. However, something about that thing that was hanging on the fence really scared him. That is a mucklow. What's a muckalau? I asked, probably butchering it. This would have normally gotten a laugh out of my grandpa, but not today. Today he just stared at the little knot made out of sticks and leather bindings, like it was a declaration of war. I'm not really sure, sweetie, but my grandpa always told me they were a warning and that I was never to go anywhere near them when I saw them. But who are they a warning from? Grandpa was quiet for a minute, seeming to try to find the right answer, and without my realizing it, he was starting to back towards the house and away from the mucklows in the back pasture. I don't know, sweetie, but I know what my grandpa told me, and I've always believed him. He told me that the mucklow were warnings from the creatures that lived in the woods. Like monsters? I cut in. Yeah. No, darling. There are monsters in the woods. Dang. No, darling. There are no monsters in the woods. What lives in the woods is just something old. It was there before we were, and it still considers this to be its land. It's always lived in relative peace with us, but sometimes it hangs those symbols to let us know that it's conducting business or having a meeting or just doesn't want to be messed with. If you see those symbols, you must never go anywhere near them. Where was it? We walked back through the field towards Grandpa's house, the cows mooing around us placidly, and I had enough time to think about it as we walked. I'd never been unwelcome in any part of the farm, but there were places that Grandpa said were dangerous. Some places were dangerous if you didn't have a grown-up, like the fishing pond or the hayloft. Some places were dangerous because of wild animals, like the forest or the boar pen, or where Grandpa kept the big hogs. Those all made sense, but this was different. This felt like magic, and I don't know any little girl who doesn't like magic. What will happen if I go over there? I asked, remembering stories about people being transported by fairies to strange worlds or coming back to find that 1,000 years had passed. Grandpa turned me to look at him, getting very close so I could see how serious he was, and his eyes were absolutely without happiness or mirth for the first time that I could ever remember. You would die, baby girl. It's important that you know that those things will kill you, and I'd be very sorry to lose you. You have to promise me that you will never go beyond those signals. Do you understand? Sigils. As I sat there and looked into his eyes, I could tell that he was absolutely serious. Grandpa liked to play jokes sometimes, but today was not going to be one of them. Grandpa was afraid that something would happen to me, and I nodded as I told him that I would never go there if I saw the signs. That seemed to make him feel better, and he sighed happily as he walked towards the house. Now then, let's go see if your grandma's made any cookies. That was the first time I remember hearing about the strange little symbols, but it wasn't the last time I ever saw one. I've lived with my grandparents since I was about 2 years old. My dad was gone before I was even born, and my mom had gotten herself into some trouble with a new boyfriend just after I was born. Mom liked to use drugs, of a kind that my grandmother was never very open about, and when the police caught her with them, they had taken her away and taken me to foster care. Her new boyfriend was nowhere to be found, but Grandma and Grandpa were more than happy to take in their wayward grandchild. Grandma and Grandpa had a big farm down in Tennessee. They raised cows and sheep, a few goats, and some pigs, and Grandpa even raised boars that he would let people hunt for a fee. They did all right, and I can remember many happy years spent on the farm. They never spoiled me, but they were never cruel to me either. For all intents and purposes, I was their daughter, and they brought me up in the same way they had brought my mother up, though I like to hope the results will be strikingly different. After that day, I began to look a little closer at the symbols that were sometimes found around the farm. They were these little Celtic knots that had been woven out of plant fibers and sticks, and sometimes even the hair of the animals. They were always gone a day later, and I don't think I ever saw one that was up for longer than 24 hours. Uh, where were we? They didn't just appear on the fence either. I remember one morning, Grandpa and I were walking to the cow shed to milk the cows when we came across one of the doors to the barn. Grandpa looked at me, and the message was clear. I didn't go near that barn for the rest of the day, and when I came out of the field that afternoon from picking flowers, I noticed that the sigil was gone. I was never afraid of the little symbols, but I was careful around them. It was like the snakes that sometimes slithered in on hot summer days that you could find in the cow fields. I never went in fear of them. Grandpa said that wouldn't do, but I was careful of them, and that's exactly how I was around whatever made the mucklows. I was careful. I obeyed Grandpa, at least until I was about 9 years old. One day, while I was out playing in the barnyard, I found another one of those symbols on the door to the old cowshed. Text-to-type does not like the word symbols. It seems to think it's schedules. That throws me off. Big stretch. The old cowshed was more of a barn than a shed, and I knew there was a way to get into the loft above it without being seen. I was 9 and very curious, and I really wanted to know what those mysterious things were. I looked around to make sure that no one could see me, and then I made my way around the back and onto the small barrel that sat at the back of the shed. If I stood on it, and nobody had bothered to drain it, I could go right up into the top of the shed, and I felt pretty smart as I did it. I was going to find out what these little things were before anybody else, and I couldn't help but grin as I slid into the dark rafters of the building. Excuse me. Oh, hey, buddy. Yeah, a little bit, but that's okay. There's still some story to go. My shoulders ached as I lifted myself up into the rafters and pulled myself along the narrow beam that stretched across the length of the shed. It had probably been coated in rooster... It had probably been used to roost chickens at one point or another, but now it made a great way for me to move unseen inside the barn. The board was lightly speckled with old droppings, and I was sure that I was leaving a trail of dust behind me as I went. The board was between the roof slats and the tin roof, so I had to army crawl my way across it. I listened for the slightest sounds from below. I'd expected to hear the weird gibberish or... Bleh. There we go. I'd expected to hear weird gibberish or even maybe screaming, but really it was just the strange crunching sounds of someone chewing hard candy or eating rock candy. There was another sound too, something I couldn't quite place, but the closer I got to the middle, the more I began to realize it was the sound of fearful squeaking. It sounded like someone was chasing rats or something, and it made my skin crawl the longer it went on. As I came to the area in the middle, a little expanse between the roof beams, I looked down into the dark shed and tried to find the source of those noises. Even at midday, the old cowshed was pretty dark, and there was only one window towards the back. It wasn't bringing in a lot of light that day. As my eyes grew accustomed to the lack of light, I saw something down in the old hay, and it wasn't what I had expected. I could see something small and furry moving amidst the old hay down there, but it wasn't until one of them broke the surface that I realized those were the rats they had been hunting. One of them came up out of the hay like some kind of shark from the water, and even after having seen it, it's still something that's hard to describe. The closest I can come to is that it looks like a potato with teeth. Not like a regular potato, like a normal-looking spud, but like one of those potatoes that you see at the high-end restaurants, the one that's about the size of a double fist. It had a mouth full of bent-looking teeth, and as it shook the rat that it had in its mouth, I could hear the poor creature screaming as it writhed in pain. It was really tearing it to pieces, shaking it from side to side, and as the gore flew, I saw it let go for a moment, so it could chew at the rat's innards as it drug it out. The rat tried to escape, maybe figuring that now was the time to get away, but suddenly the thing turned and bit it again, digging its teeth in as it dragged out another mouthful of meat. From my vantage point, I could see others too, little potato things that circled around in the hay. There had to be at least a dozen of them, and I think that realization was maybe what told me I was in trouble. They weren't very large, maybe twice as large as the rats they were eating, but I was in... There were so many of them that they'd probably pull me down like piranhas in a stream. Suddenly I knew I had to get out of here before they resurfaced, and I began to make my way back slowly and meticulously. I was combat crawling, slow work to be sure, but when the board creaked beneath me, I realized I hadn't been going slow enough. I could hear their chittering stop below me, and I didn't need to see them looking at me to know that they were all down there, glancing up to see what was waiting in the rafters for them. It's strange to realize that you're the subject of interest for predators, and I could feel the sweat dripping off of me as I did my best to stay completely still. It was the same feeling I got when I lay under my covers and just knew that there was a monster hiding in the closet. I got them. Repeated it for some reason. That's weird. Okay. These things sounded ridiculous to an adult, but when you're a kid, you just know that there's monsters waiting for you on some kind of instinctual level. You just know there's a troll or a dragon waiting to gobble you up if you go too far from home. Childhood is strange like that, and this moment was no stranger than any of the rest of it. They were staring at me for what felt like hours, but It was probably minutes before they went back to whatever they had been doing and left me to my own devices. I had to force myself to slow crawl on the way out, not daring to go very fast, and when my foot finally found the edge of the rafter beam, I was free to pull myself back to the ground, breathing a sigh of relief and knowing that I was safe once again. That relief lasted until I turned around to find my grandpa standing there, watching my descent from the rafters. I had expected him to be angry. I had broken the rules, after all. But to my surprise, he just wrapped me in a hug and said that he was glad I hadn't been hurt. I felt him crying against my shoulder, and I think that's how much danger I'd really been. Sorry, guys, I'm struggling here. That's how I realized how much danger I had been in. If my stoic of a grandfather was openly crying, then I could have very well been on death's door in that cowshed. Night, Leah. Leia, thanks for joining us. I started to ask him what they were and what was going on, but he just put a finger to my lips and told me to come with him. Silent as we could, we went back to the house, and there he told me what he knew. When I saw that mucklow and couldn't find you, I just knew that you'd gone into the cowshed despite what I'd told you. I can't be that mad about it. I know that children are curious, like I was curious when I was your age. Grandpa, did you see them too? He nodded slowly, like he was sharing some deep secret. I saw them once, when I was very young. I was about your age, maybe a little older. It was an early morning, and I had been sent out to milk the cows. I was heading out there with my bucket when I saw their symbol and knew that they were in there. It was the same cowshed that you just snuck into, and like you, I wanted to know what they were and why my dad was so afraid of them. I was a little taller than you, so instead of climbing into the roof, I hopped up on a barrel and looked through the window. I expected to see fairies or elves or something, maybe going about some secret business, but what I saw was nothing at first. We had a couple of milk cows, Clarabelle and Greta, and Clarabelle was standing off to the side by the door. She was making that bawing sound that cows always make when they're in distress, and her calf that she'd had a few days before was making a similar sound as it looked for its milk. I didn't know what they were doing at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the light, I soon found out. Night, Cindy. Thanks for stopping by. They were suckling at the cow's udders, their little teeth leaving long, jagged marks on the flesh. The cow was screaming as they did so. I was surprised, I suppose, because the next thing I knew, I had tipped backwards and was falling off the back of the barrel. I must have made a lot of racket, because as I sat up and rubbed my head, I saw something looking at me from beside the shed. It was one of those things, and even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was staring at me. We just sort of looked at each other for a few minutes, neither of us saying or doing anything, and then it let out this strange keening noise and started chasing after me. It was small, barely coming up to my ankle, but it was so strange looking that all I could do was run. I ran flat out for the house, afraid that the others I saw would be after me too. I just knew somehow that if it caught me, my parents would never find my body. That thing would kill me in a matter of seconds. They didn't catch me, obviously, but I remember when I slammed that door behind me, My dad looked up from his morning paper and looked madder than hell. You didn't slam doors in my dad's house, not unless you were looking to catch a beating. But when he saw my face, he must have known what I had seen. Oof. Goodness. A little water went down the wrong way there. He just scooped me into a hug and told me it was okay and that I was safe now. I tried to tell him what I've seen, but he just shook his head and said it didn't matter. He said they couldn't get me and that I was safe. I had to believe that he had seen them before, especially the way he acted. I'm beginning to think so. Ugh. He acted. I can't imagine why anyone would let those things live so close to their house. But I suppose we didn't have much of a choice. They're older than the forest. They're older than anything. And they endure. One day, God willing, you'll have to decide what to do about them. But I suggest you make peace with them. They've seen so much come and go, and they never go anywhere. That was many years ago. Now I work on the farm that my grandpa tended so lovingly. He's been dead for nearly a decade, but I never forgot what he said about those little creatures that live in the woods. I still find the mucklow around the farm sometimes, and now I'm a little more careful to leave them alone. I tell my kids not to go near them either, and for the most part, they listen, though they've never told me if they've encountered the little devils. Grandpa was right about one thing. Whatever these creatures are, they're not going anywhere, and it's best to just get used to them. Otherwise, you might find out how sharp those teeth are as you go out for your morning milking. Alrighty, and that's our stories for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope we'll see you next time. And this was kind of a long one. We went for 2.5 hours tonight. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and I hope we'll see you next time. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.